They bought a trip without me. Not just forgot, but deliberately excluded me, the mother, grandmother, woman who raised them all. I saw their passports, their itinerary spread out on the kitchen table, my name nowhere, like I was invisible. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. It was an ordinary June morning in my Brooklyn neighborhood, the same streets I've called home for over 50 years. The familiar crack in the sidewalk outside my brownstone, the scent of fresh bagels drifting from Goldstein's Deli on the corner, the mix of English and Yiddish from Mrs. Rosenberg chatting with her daughter by the bus stop. Everything felt normal, routine, predictable. I was wearing my favorite lavender cardigan, the one David gave me 3 birthdays ago when he still remembered such things. My hands, marked with age spots and the faint tremor that comes with 72 years of life, carefully arranged my morning pills on the kitchen windowsill. 7 different bottles, each label a reminder of time's relentless march. Blood pressure, arthritis, calcium, vitamin D. The ritual of aging, performed in silence. The tea kettle whistled its familiar tune as I shuffled to the stove in my worn slippers, the ones with the hole near the big toe that I kept meaning to replace but never did. Such small comforts become precious when you live alone, when the silence stretches for hours between the rare phone calls that never seem to come anymore. I pulled out the old shoebox from beneath my bed, the one filled with photographs that used to make me smile but now felt like evidence of a life that once mattered. Wedding pictures, baby photos, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Each frame a fragment of happier times when being a mother and grandmother meant something more than being a forgotten obligation. But that morning, exhaustion pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. The kind of tiredness that sleep couldn't cure, that came from years of trying too hard, giving too much, hoping for crumbs of affection from the children I'd sacrificed everything to raise. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from David. Mom, can you watch Petunia this weekend? We have some family plans. Petunia, their spoiled golden retriever who shed all over my furniture and whined whenever Jennifer wasn't around to baby her. Even the dog got more attention than I did. I stared at that message for a long moment, my heart sinking with familiar disappointment. Family plans. Always family plans that somehow didn't include the woman who'd given birth to half the family and raised the rest. I typed back, of course, because that's what I always did. What I always said. What was expected of me. But something felt different this time. Something in the air, in the way David's message was worded, in the casual dismissal that had become so routine I almost didn't notice it anymore. Almost. 3 hours later, I understood why. I'd gone to David's house to pick up Petunia's food and toys, using the spare key they'd given me years ago when they still trusted me with such responsibilities. The house was empty, Jennifer's car gone from the driveway, David's work truck nowhere to be seen. I called out anyway, just to be safe, my voice echoing through their pristine living room with its white furniture that I was never allowed to sit on when I visited. Walking toward the kitchen to find Petunia's bowls, I saw them. Spread across their granite island like a celebration I wasn't invited to. Passports. 4 of them, lined up next to a colorful brochure for Disney World. Travel documents with names I recognized, David Michael Cohen, Jennifer Ann Cohen, Rachel Elizabeth Cohen, Nathan James Cohen. My hands shook as I picked up the itinerary. Orlando, Florida. 5 days, 4 nights at the Grand Floridian Resort. Flight confirmation numbers, dinner reservations, park tickets. A family vacation planned down to the minute, budgeted and booked and paid for. Without me. My name wasn't on a single document. Not on the hotel reservation, not on the rental car, not even as an emergency contact. As if I didn't exist. As if the woman who'd changed David's diapers and stayed up all night with his fevers and paid for his college tuition was nothing more than a convenient babysitter for their overpampered dog. The paper fluttered from my fingers to the floor as the truth hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was deliberate exclusion from my own family, planned and executed with the kind of careful precision Jennifer brought to her Pinterest boards and Instagram posts. They were celebrating David's 45th birthday. My son's birthday. The boy I'd labored 18 hours to bring into this world, the child I'd sung to sleep every night until he was 7, the young man I'd supported through his divorce from his first wife, his struggles with finding steady work, his battles with depression that had nearly claimed him twice. I sank onto one of their expensive bar stools, the leather cold against my legs, and tried to remember when exactly I'd become invisible to the family I'd spent my entire adult life building. The memories came flooding back like a dam bursting, decades of sacrifice and love and endless giving that had led to this moment. This betrayal. This casual cruelty disguised as family planning. I remembered the early years after David's father died, when it was just me and my boy against the world. Working double shifts at the hospital as a nurse, coming home exhausted to help with homework and pack lunches and attend every soccer game and school play. The nights I went without dinner so he could have seconds, the times I wore shoes with holes in them so he could have the latest sneakers. When he married his first wife, Sarah, I'd welcomed her like the daughter I'd never had. Helped plan their wedding, contributed to the down payment on their first house, babysat little Rachel whenever they needed date nights or weekend getaways. When that marriage fell apart, I'd been there to pick up the pieces, to watch Rachel every other weekend, to listen to David cry about his failures and fears. Then came Jennifer. Beautiful, ambitious Jennifer with her marketing degree and her carefully curated social media presence. At first, I'd been grateful. Someone to love my son, to give Rachel a stepmother, to help create the stable family I'd always dreamed he'd have. But Jennifer saw me differently. Not as family, but as competition. Not as a loving grandmother, but as an inconvenience. She had her own parents, successful people with money and connections and vacation homes in the Hamptons. What did she need with a working-class widow from Brooklyn? The changes were subtle at first. Visits became less frequent. Phone calls grew shorter. Holiday invitations came with conditions and restrictions. We're doing Christmas morning at my parents' this year, but you're welcome to join us for dessert. Rachel's dance recital is sold out, but we'll take pictures. The kids are too excited to sit still for a long dinner, maybe we can do something quieter next time. Next time. Always next time. A promise that never quite materialized into reality. I thought about all the money I'd given them over the years. The check for $5,000 when Jennifer lost her job. The $15,000 for Rachel's private school tuition. The monthly payments toward their mortgage when David's construction business was struggling. Money I'd pulled from my retirement account, my savings, my future security. It's just temporary, Mom, David had said. Just until we get back on our feet. That was 3 years ago. Not once had they offered to pay me back. Not once had they acknowledged the sacrifice I'd made. When I gently mentioned the money last Christmas, Jennifer had looked at me like I'd slapped her. Family doesn't keep score, she'd said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. But apparently, family did keep some people off vacation itineraries. I picked up the brochure again, studying the smiling families in the photos. Parents holding hands with children, grandparents watching parades with grandchildren on their shoulders. The kind of magical moments I'd dreamed of sharing with Rachel and Nathan, the memories I'd hoped to make in what might be the final healthy years of my life. Instead, I was relegated to pet-sitting duty while they lived it up at the most expensive resort in Orlando. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd helped pay for this trip with all those years of financial support, all those gifts and loans and contributions that were never repaid. My own money, used to fund my own exclusion. The front door slammed, startling me from my thoughts. Jennifer's heels clicked across the hardwood floor with sharp, impatient steps. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the afternoon light, her expression shifting from surprise to annoyance in the span of a heartbeat. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice carrying that familiar edge that had become her default tone whenever she spoke to me. I gestured weakly at the scattered travel documents. "I came to get Petunia's things. I saw." "Those are private," she snapped, quickly gathering up the passports and papers like I'd been caught reading her diary. "You shouldn't be going through our personal business." Personal business. As if planning a family vacation that deliberately excluded me was just another household detail, like choosing new curtains or deciding what to plant in the garden. "I wasn't going through anything," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "It was all spread out on the counter. I was just looking for the dog food." Jennifer's laugh was cold, brittle. "Right. Of course you were." The accusation hung in the air between us like smoke. In her eyes, I wasn't a concerned mother trying to understand why she'd been abandoned. I was a nosy old woman snooping through things that weren't my concern. "When were you planning to tell me?" I asked, the words coming out stronger than I'd expected. "Tell you what? About the trip. About celebrating David's birthday without me." Jennifer's expression hardened. She crossed her arms over her designer blouse and tilted her head with the kind of condescending smile she usually reserved for difficult customers at her job. "Not everything is about you," she said. "We wanted a small, intimate celebration. Just the immediate family." Immediate family. The words hit me like a slap. After 45 years of being David's mother, after 7 years of being Rachel's grandmother, after treating Nathan like my own grandson since he was 3 years old, I was no longer immediate family. "I am immediate family," I said, hating how desperate I sounded. "I'm David's mother. You're also 72 years old. Florida in July is hot and humid. The parks involve a lot of walking. The kids want to go on the big rides and stay up late for fireworks. We thought you'd be more comfortable staying home." Each word was carefully chosen, delivered with the kind of fake concern that made the dismissal even more insulting. She was painting me as frail, as a burden, as someone who would hold back their precious family fun with my elderly limitations. You didn't even ask, I whispered. Ask what? If I wanted to go. If I could handle it. You just decided for me. You planned an entire vacation around my son's birthday and never once considered including me. Jennifer sighed dramatically, like I was a difficult child having a tantrum. Look, I'm sorry you're upset. But we can't include everyone in everything. Maybe we can plan something smaller when we get back. A nice dinner or something. A consolation prize. A participation trophy for the grandmother who didn't make the cut for the real celebration. I stood up slowly, my arthritic knees protesting the sudden movement. For a moment, I thought about arguing more, about demanding to know why I wasn't worthy of inclusion, about listing all the ways I'd supported this family over the years. But what was the point? Jennifer had made her position clear. I was peripheral now, optional, a former star player who'd been moved to the bench without even being told the game had changed. Where are Petunia's things? I asked instead, my voice flat and tired. In the mudroom. Her leash is hanging by the back door. I gathered the dog's supplies in silence while Jennifer watched me with barely concealed impatience. Food bowls, toys, blanket, leash. Everything Petunia would need for her stay at Grandma's house while her real family enjoyed the vacation of a lifetime. As I reached the front door, Jennifer called after me. We leave Thursday morning. We'll be back Tuesday evening. I'll text you when we land. Thursday morning. 3 days away. They'd been planning this for months, booking flights and hotels and restaurants, and they were giving me 3 days' notice to watch their dog. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just nodded and walked out into the fading afternoon light. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of familiar streets and unfamiliar pain. I'd thought I understood disappointment, had believed I'd experienced the full spectrum of family hurt over the years. But this was something else entirely. This was the complete erasure of my significance, the casual deletion of my role from their story. By the time I reached my building, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. Mrs. Chen from the corner market was setting up the evening displays outside her shop, arranging newspapers and magazines with the careful precision of someone who'd been doing the same job for 30 years. She waved as I passed, and I tried to wave back, but my arm felt heavy, foreign. In my apartment, I set down Petunia's things and walked straight to the kitchen sink. I needed water, needed tea, needed something to wash away the bitter taste of rejection that seemed to coat my throat. I reached for my favorite mug, the one Rachel had made me in pottery class when she was 8, painted with wonky flowers and "World's Best Grandma" in childish letters. The mug slipped from my trembling fingers and shattered against the tile floor, pieces of ceramic scattering like my fractured heart. I stared down at the broken fragments, at the painted flowers now split and meaningless, and for the first time in decades, I let myself cry. Not the quiet tears I'd shed in private over the years, not the careful sorrow I'd learned to hide behind smiles and acceptance. This was raw, ugly sobbing that came from somewhere deep and primal, the sound of a woman finally acknowledging the depth of her own abandonment. I slid down the kitchen wall until I was sitting on the floor among the broken pieces, my lavender cardigan catching on the rough texture of the cabinet door. Petunia patted over and nuzzled my hand with her wet nose, sensing distress in the way animals do, offering the kind of uncomplicated comfort that had become so rare in my human relationships. For an hour, maybe longer, I sat there in my broken kitchen holding a dog that wasn't even mine, crying for the family I'd lost and the woman I'd allowed myself to become. Somewhere in that time of complete breakdown, something else began to emerge. Something harder and clearer and completely unfamiliar. Rage. Not the quick flash of anger that comes and goes, but a cold, steady fury that settled in my chest like a winter wind. I was angry at David for allowing this exclusion. I was angry at Jennifer for orchestrating it. I was angry at myself for accepting years of diminishing returns on my love and investment. But mostly, I was angry at the realization that I had spent so many years trying to earn affection from people who saw me as nothing more than a convenient resource to be tapped when needed and ignored when inconvenient. I pulled myself up from the floor, brushing ceramic dust from my clothes, and walked to my bedroom dresser. In the bottom drawer, beneath old sweaters and forgotten scarves, was my emergency fund. $3,000 in cash that I'd saved over 2 years, putting aside $20 or $30 whenever I could manage it. Money I'd planned to give David for Christmas or use for Rachel's graduation gift. I counted it twice, the bills crisp and full of possibility. $3,000. Not enough for Disney World at the Grand Floridian, but enough for something else entirely. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, the ancient Dell that David had bought me for Christmas 3 years ago when he still made those kinds of gestures. The screen took forever to load, the wireless connection struggling with the demands of modern internet, but eventually, I found myself on a travel website. Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'd dreamed of visiting for 30 years, ever since seeing a documentary about the art galleries and desert landscapes, the adobe buildings and mountain vistas that looked like something from another planet. I'd mentioned it to my family countless times over the years, showing them pictures in travel magazines, talking about the pottery and the culture and the beauty of the Southwest. Maybe someday, David used to say. When I get some vacation time. It's so far, Jennifer would add. And expensive. The altitude might be hard on you, Mom, David would conclude, as if my age automatically disqualified me from having adventures. But sitting alone in my kitchen at 11 o'clock at night, with a dog at my feet and the bitter taste of exclusion still fresh in my mouth, someday suddenly became now. I booked a flight to Albuquerque for Thursday afternoon. The same day my family would be boarding their plane to Orlando. I found a small bed and breakfast in the historic district of Santa Fe, the kind of place with thick walls and wooden beams and windows that looked out onto courtyards filled with flowers. 5 days, 4 nights. The exact same length as their precious family vacation. But this one would be mine. Completely and entirely mine. The credit card transaction went through without drama, the confirmation email arriving in my inbox like a small miracle. Linda Cohen, party of one. No one to consult, no one to accommodate, no one to worry about except myself. I printed out the boarding pass and hotel confirmation, handling the papers like they were precious documents. Proof of my own worth, evidence that I was still capable of making decisions and taking action and claiming space in the world. Thursday morning arrived gray and humid, typical July weather that made the city feel like a sauna. I'd barely slept, but I felt more awake than I had in years. My suitcase, small and practical, sat by the front door packed with clothes I'd chosen for myself. Comfortable sandals, loose cotton dresses, a wide-brimmed hat I'd bought online at midnight Tuesday. David called at 7:30, his voice bright with the excitement of someone about to embark on an adventure. Morning, Mom. Just wanted to make sure you're all set for Petunia. Jennifer left detailed instructions on the counter, and there's plenty of food in the pantry. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected, there's been a change of plans. What kind of change? I could hear voices in the background, the sounds of a family preparing for departure. Suitcases zipping, children asking questions, the television broadcasting the morning news. I won't be available to watch Petunia. You'll need to make other arrangements. Silence. Complete silence except for the muffled chaos of their morning routine. What do you mean you won't be available? David's voice had shifted from cheerful to confused. We talked about this. You agreed. I agreed before I knew you were planning a family vacation without telling me. Before I realized I was good enough to watch your dog but not good enough to celebrate your birthday. More silence. Then, the sound of David's hand covering the phone and muffled conversation with Jennifer. When he came back, his tone had hardened. Mom, we discussed this. It's a small, intimate celebration. Just the 4 of us. And when exactly did we discuss it? Because I remember you asking me to pet sit, but I don't remember any conversation about why I wasn't invited to my own son's birthday celebration. You're being unreasonable. Unreasonable. The word that gets thrown at women who dare to have expectations, who refuse to accept scraps and call them feasts. No, I said quietly. I'm being unavailable. Just like you were when you planned this trip. Find someone else to watch your dog. I hung up before he could respond, my heart pounding but my hand steady. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts. David, Jennifer, even Rachel sending confused messages asking what was wrong with Grandma. I turned off my phone and finished getting ready. The taxi arrived at noon, the driver a middle-aged man with a kind face and a slight accent I couldn't place. He helped me with my suitcase and asked if I was visiting family in New Mexico. No, I told him, settling into the back seat as we pulled away from the brownstone that had been my entire world for half a century. I'm visiting me. At JFK Airport, I moved through the familiar chaos of departure lounges and security lines with a strange sense of detachment. I was surrounded by families heading to vacations, business travelers rushing to meetings, young people embarking on adventures with the casual confidence of those who'd never doubted their right to take up space in the world. I found my gate and sat in a plastic chair, watching planes taxi and depart through the wall of windows. A text notification made me glance at my phone. Jennifer had managed to call David's sister in New Jersey, and apparently, Susan had agreed to take Petunia. The crisis had been resolved without me. Good. They were learning to solve problems without assuming I'd always be available to fix things for them. The flight to Albuquerque was smooth and uneventful. I had a window seat, and as we climbed above the clouds, I watched the familiar landscape of the East Coast give way to something entirely different. Mountains and desert, vast expanses of open space that seemed to stretch beyond the horizon. I'd never traveled alone before. Every trip in my adult life had been planned around other people's needs and preferences. Family vacations where I did the cooking and cleaning. Visits to relatives where I was expected to help with childcare and household tasks. Medical appointments and errands that somehow became my responsibility because everyone else was too busy. But this was different. This was mine. The woman sitting next to me was about my age, traveling to visit her daughter who'd just had a baby. We talked quietly about grandchildren and the challenges of aging, about the strange experience of becoming invisible in a culture that worships youth. My daughter thinks I'm too old to help with the baby, she told me as we began our descent. But I raised 4 children. I think I remember how to change a diaper. They mean well, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. Do they? She asked. Or do they just mean conveniently? The question stayed with me as we landed in the thin air and bright light of New Mexico. My bed and breakfast was exactly as advertised, a converted adobe house with thick walls and wooden beams, furnished with handmade furniture and local art. My room overlooked a small courtyard where hummingbirds darted between red flowers I couldn't identify. The proprietor, a woman named Maria with silver hair and turquoise jewelry, showed me around with genuine warmth. She recommended restaurants and galleries, hiking trails and cultural sites, treating me like an interesting person worthy of adventure rather than a fragile artifact to be managed and protected. That first evening, I ate dinner alone at a restaurant recommended in my guidebook. Green chili enchiladas and a glass of local wine, eaten slowly while watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of rose and gold. Other diners chatted and laughed around me, but for the first time in years, solitude felt like a choice rather than a punishment. My phone buzzed occasionally with messages from home, but I'd learned to ignore them. This time was mine, purchased with my own money and claimed with my own courage. I spent 3 days exploring Santa Fe like the tourist I'd dreamed of being for decades. The Palace of the Governors, where Native American artisans sold jewelry and pottery under a covered portal that had sheltered vendors for over 4 centuries. The Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, where I stood transfixed by paintings that captured the stark beauty of the landscape I was finally experiencing firsthand. In Canyon Road, lined with art galleries and studios, I bought my first piece of original art, a small ceramic bowl made by a local potter, glazed in blues and greens that reminded me of water and sky. It cost more than I would normally spend on something purely decorative, but it was beautiful and it spoke to me and it was mine. On my last day, I hiked part of the Santa Fe Trail, following a path that had once carried traders and settlers across the wilderness. The altitude made me breathe harder than usual, but my legs were strong and my spirit felt lighter than it had in years. At a scenic overlook, I called Rachel. She answered on the second ring, her young voice tight with worry. Grandma? Where are you? Dad said you went crazy and disappeared. I'm in Santa Fe, sweetheart. And I'm not crazy. I'm just finally taking care of myself. But you missed Dad's birthday. Jennifer is saying terrible things about you. Of course Jennifer was saying terrible things about me. I'd disrupted her carefully orchestrated plan, had refused to play my assigned role as the reliable grandmother who could be counted on to handle inconvenient responsibilities without complaint. I'm sorry I missed your dad's birthday, I told Rachel, meaning it. But I was hurt that no one thought to include me in the celebration. I wanted you to come, she said quietly. I asked Jennifer why you weren't coming, and she said you were too old for Disney World. Too old for Disney World. As if my age automatically disqualified me from joy, from family experiences, from making memories with the grandchildren I adored. Maybe I am too old for some things, I said, watching a hawk circle in the clear desert sky. But I'm not too old to decide how I want to spend my time. Are you coming home? Tomorrow. But things are going to be different, Rachel. I love you and Nathan more than you can imagine, but I need to love myself too. That evening, my last in Santa Fe, I treated myself to dinner at the fanciest restaurant I could find. Elk tenderloin and local wine, eaten while watching the sun set behind the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It was the most expensive meal I'd ever bought for myself, and every bite felt like an act of rebellion. The flight home was delayed, and I didn't arrive at JFK until nearly midnight. The taxi ride through the dark streets of Brooklyn felt like traveling between 2 different worlds, from the expansive possibilities of the Southwest back to the familiar constraints of my old life. But something fundamental had changed in those 5 days. I'd proven to myself that I could navigate airports and rental cars and unfamiliar cities. I'd eaten alone in restaurants without shame, had struck up conversations with strangers, had made decisions based purely on my own desires and interests. I was still Linda Cohen, 72-year-old widow from Brooklyn. But I was also someone else now, someone I was just beginning to meet. My apartment felt smaller when I returned, cluttered with the accumulated possessions of decades spent in one place. I unpacked slowly, hanging my travel clothes in the closet next to garments I hadn't worn in years. The ceramic bowl from Santa Fe looked perfect on my kitchen windowsill, catching the morning light like a small miracle. David called while I was making coffee Tuesday morning, his voice carefully controlled but edged with anger. We need to talk, he said. Good morning to you too. How was Disney World? Don't play games, Mom. You know how it was. We spent the whole vacation worrying about you, dealing with your drama. Jennifer had to arrange last-minute pet care, and the kids kept asking why Grandma was acting crazy. There was that word again. Crazy. The label applied to women who refuse to accept unacceptable treatment, who dare to have standards and boundaries. I'm sorry the vacation was difficult, I said, and I meant it. I'd never wanted to cause pain for Rachel and Nathan, innocent casualties in the war between their parents' selfishness and my emerging self-respect. Are you? Because it seems like you planned this whole thing to sabotage our family time. I planned to take care of myself when my own family made it clear I wasn't a priority. You are a priority, Mom. But you can't expect to be included in everything. I didn't expect to be included in everything. I expected to be included in my son's birthday celebration. There's a difference. I could hear Jennifer in the background, her voice sharp and insistent, though I couldn't make out the words. Jennifer thinks we need to set some boundaries, David said finally. What kind of boundaries? Maybe we all need some space. Some time to think about what we really want from this relationship. The threat was clear, delivered with the casual cruelty that had become his family's specialty. Shape up or ship out. Accept your diminished role or lose what little access you have left. A year ago, even 6 months ago, those words would have sent me into a panic of apology and accommodation. I would have begged for forgiveness, promised to be more understanding, offered more money or more help or more of whatever they thought I owed them for the privilege of their minimal affection. But sitting in my kitchen with the morning light streaming through windows I'd cleaned myself, surrounded by the small treasures I'd collected during my solo adventure, I felt something different. Not panic, but clarity. You're right, I said quietly. We do need boundaries. Let me start. I won't be available for last-minute pet sitting anymore. I won't be lending money without discussing terms and repayment schedules. And I won't be accepting invitations to family events where I'm treated as help instead of family. Mom, I'm not finished. I love you, David. I love all of you. But I won't buy that love with my dignity anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it needs to be based on mutual respect. If you just want someone to solve your problems and boost your bank account, you'll need to look elsewhere. I hung up before he could respond, my heart racing but my conviction solid. The next few weeks were the loneliest I'd experienced since my husband's death. No calls from David or Jennifer, no visits from the grandchildren, no requests for favors or money or time. My phone sat silent on the kitchen counter, its quiet presence a constant reminder of my new reality. But loneliness, I discovered, was different from solitude. Loneliness was the desperate craving for connection, the hollow ache of feeling unwanted and unnecessary. Solitude was the conscious choice to be alone, to prioritize my own peace over other people's drama. I used the time to deep clean my apartment, getting rid of possessions that no longer served me. I donated clothes I'd kept out of guilt, books I'd never reread, kitchen gadgets that had seemed essential when I was cooking for a family that rarely came to dinner. I also used the time to think, really think, about what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. I was 72 years old, potentially facing decades more of life if I was lucky. Did I want to spend those years begging for crumbs of affection from people who saw me as a burden? Or did I want to build something else, something better? The answer came to me gradually, not in a flash of inspiration but in the slow accumulation of small realizations. I wanted to matter. Not as a solution to other people's problems, but as a person worthy of love and respect in my own right. I started small. I joined a book club at the local library, something I'd always wanted to do but had never found time for when I was constantly available for family emergencies. The other members were mostly women my age, many of them dealing with similar family dynamics, adult children who took more than they gave. My daughter calls me every day, said Eleanor, a retired teacher with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes. But it's always because she needs something. Babysitting, money, emotional support for whatever crisis she's manufactured this week. My son and his wife act like I'm too stupid to manage my own finances, added Ruth, a former accountant who'd raised 4 children as a single mother. They want access to my bank accounts, just in case, but they can't seem to remember to pay me back the money I've already lent them. We called ourselves the Forgotten Mothers Club, though never in public. It was a joke that wasn't really a joke, a shared recognition of our diminished status in families we'd sacrificed everything to create and maintain. But we also shared something else, the growing realization that we still had choices, still had power, still had the right to demand better treatment. Through Ruth, I met Sarah Martinez, a lawyer who specialized in elder financial abuse. She worked out of a small office near the courthouse, helping seniors who'd been exploited by family members, caregivers, and financial advisors. It's more common than people realize, Sarah told me during our first consultation. Adult children who see their parents as walking ATMs, who use guilt and family loyalty to justify taking advantage of someone's generosity. I showed her the receipts I'd kept over the years, the careful records of loans and gifts and contributions that had never been repaid. $15,000 for Rachel's school. $5,000 for Jennifer's job loss. $3,000 for their car repair. Monthly payments toward their mortgage that had stretched for 3 years. You have legal options, Sarah said. But the emotional cost of pursuing them might be higher than the financial recovery. You need to decide what matters most to you, getting your money back or establishing boundaries for the future. I thought about it for a week, weighing the satisfaction of forcing repayment against the certainty that legal action would end any chance of reconciliation with my son. In the end, the choice was easier than I'd expected. I didn't want the money back. I wanted them to stop asking for more. Sarah helped me draft a letter that was both legal document and emotional boundary, a clear statement of new terms for any future relationship. No more loans without written agreements. No more gifts without clear expectations. No more emergency babysitting without reasonable notice. But most importantly, no more treating me like I was lucky to receive whatever scraps of attention they chose to offer. The letter went out on a Tuesday in August, delivered by certified mail to ensure it couldn't be ignored or dismissed. I spent that day in Prospect Park, feeding ducks and reading on a bench under old oak trees, trying to distract myself from imagining David's reaction to what he'd undoubtedly see as another sign of my deteriorating mental health. He called that evening, his voice tight with controlled fury. "What the hell is this, Mom? A legal threat? Are you actually threatening to sue your own family?" "I'm establishing boundaries," I said calmly. "The same boundaries any healthy relationship should have. This is insane. You're acting like we're criminals instead of your family. Family doesn't exploit each other financially. Family doesn't exclude people from major celebrations without discussion. Family doesn't treat people like free labor. We never treated you like free labor. David, I've loaned you over $30,000 in the past 5 years. I've provided free childcare, free pet care, free emotional support whenever you've needed it. When was the last time you did something for me that wasn't related to a crisis or emergency?" Silence. Long, uncomfortable silence that stretched between us like a chasm. "That's different," he said finally. "You're our mother. It's what mothers do." "No," I said quietly. "It's what martyrs do. And I'm done being a martyr." The conversation ended badly, with accusations and hurt feelings on both sides. David accused me of changing, of becoming selfish and bitter in my old age. I accused him of taking advantage of my love, of seeing me as a resource rather than a person. Both accusations were probably true. September arrived with the kind of crisp, clear weather that made Brooklyn feel almost festive. The trees along my street began their annual transformation, leaves shifting from green to gold to red in a display that never failed to move me. I was coming back from the farmer's market, my canvas bag heavy with late-season tomatoes and early apples, when I saw Rachel sitting on my front steps. She was taller than I remembered, her 13-year-old body stretching toward the young woman she was becoming. But her face was still the sweet, open expression I'd fallen in love with the day she was born, back when Jennifer actually wanted me around for important family moments. "Hi, Grandma," she said, standing up from the concrete steps and brushing dust off her jeans. "Rachel, sweetheart. What are you doing here? Do your parents know where you are?" She shook her head, suddenly looking much younger than her years. "I took the subway. I told them I was going to the library." I unlocked my front door and ushered her inside, my heart racing with a mixture of joy and worry. Joy at seeing my granddaughter, worry about the trouble this unexpected visit might cause. "Are you hungry? Thirsty?" I asked, falling back on the grandmother instincts that never seemed to fade no matter how much pain her parents had caused me. "I'm okay. I wanted to see you. To talk to you." We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd spread out homework assignments and art projects when she was little, where I'd served countless meals and snacks during happier times when she visited regularly. "I miss you," she said simply, and the words broke my heart in the best possible way. "I miss you too, sweetheart. More than you know. Dad says you're going through a difficult time. That you need space to figure things out." I almost laughed at David's version of our estrangement, the way he'd managed to make my demand for basic respect sound like a mental health crisis. "I am figuring things out," I agreed. "I'm figuring out how to have relationships based on mutual respect instead of one-sided giving." Rachel was quiet for a long moment, her young face serious with thought. "Is it because of the Disney trip?" she asked finally. "Because we didn't invite you?" "It's because of a lot of things, honey. The Disney trip was just the moment when I realized I deserved better. I wanted you to come. I told Jennifer it wouldn't be the same without you, but she said you couldn't handle all the walking and excitement. Did she now? She thinks you're getting old and confused. But you seem fine to me. Different, but not confused." Different. Yes, I was definitely different. The question was whether different was better or worse, and that probably depended on your perspective. "Rachel, I want you to understand something. The problems between me and your parents have nothing to do with you. I love you and Nathan more than I can express, and that will never change no matter what happens. But you won't come to family things anymore. I'll come to family things where I'm actually wanted as family, not as free help or an obligation to be managed. She nodded slowly, processing this distinction with the seriousness of someone much older. Can I still visit you? Even if it makes Dad mad? The question pierced my heart. A 13-year-old shouldn't have to choose between her grandmother and her father's approval. But apparently, that's what my demand for dignity had created. You can always visit me, I said carefully. But I don't want to cause problems between you and your parents. They love you and want to protect you. From what? From spending time with my grandmother? From what, indeed? From the dangerous influence of a woman who decided she deserved respect? From the radical idea that family loyalty should run both ways? Rachel stayed for 2 hours, helping me organize photos and telling me about school and friends and the small dramas of teenage life. It felt wonderfully normal, the kind of grandmother-granddaughter interaction that had become so rare in recent years. When it was time for her to leave, I walked her to the subway station, my heart heavy with the knowledge that these stolen moments might be all we'd have for a long time. "Grandma," she said as we reached the turnstiles. "Yes, sweetheart? I'm proud of you. For standing up for yourself. I know it's hard." I watched her disappear down the stairs toward the platform, this wise young woman who somehow understood what her father couldn't grasp, that demanding respect wasn't selfish, it was necessary. That evening, David called. His voice was cold, controlled, dangerous. "Rachel told us she visited you today." "Yes, she did. Without permission. Without supervision. She's 13 years old, Mom. Anything could have happened to her on the subway. She's a smart girl. She made it here safely and home safely. That's not the point. You should have called us immediately. Instead, you decided to undermine our authority as parents." "I didn't undermine anything. I spent time with my granddaughter, who wanted to see me. She's confused because of all this drama you've created. She doesn't understand why you're acting so differently, why you've decided to blow up our family over minor disagreements." Minor disagreements. The systematic exclusion from family events, the financial exploitation, the casual dismissal of my worth as a human being, all minor disagreements in David's world. "I haven't blown up anything," I said quietly. "I've just stopped accepting unacceptable treatment. If you want to see the kids, you'll do it on our terms. With our supervision. When and where we decide is appropriate." The ultimatum hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Play by their rules or lose access to the grandchildren I adored. Submit to their control or lose what little family connection I had left. A year ago, that threat would have sent me into immediate capitulation. I would have apologized, begged forgiveness, promised to be more compliant in exchange for supervised visits and carefully rationed grandparent time. But something had changed in the months since Disney World. Something fundamental had shifted in my understanding of my own worth and what I would accept in exchange for love. "David," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected, "I've spent 45 years loving you unconditionally. I've supported you financially, emotionally, and practically through every crisis and challenge of your adult life. I've been the grandmother your children deserved, even when their parents made it clear I was barely tolerated in their lives. Mom, I'm not finished. I will always love you. All of you. But I won't buy that love with my dignity anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it will be based on mutual respect. If you want a banking service and free childcare, you'll need to look elsewhere. You're choosing pride over family. No. I'm choosing self-respect over abuse. There's a difference." I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking but my resolve solid. The next few months were the most challenging of this entire ordeal. No contact from David or Jennifer, no surprise visits from Rachel, no family holidays or birthday celebrations. I was effectively erased from their lives, which was apparently the price of demanding to be treated like a human being rather than a convenient resource. But I wasn't alone, not really. The book club became a source of genuine friendship, women who understood the complexities of family relationships and the courage required to set boundaries. Ruth introduced me to a pottery class at the community center, where I discovered an unexpected talent for shaping clay with my arthritic hands. I also discovered something else, the joy of spending money on myself without guilt. The small ceramic bowl from Santa Fe had started something, a permission to invest in beauty and pleasure simply because they brought me happiness. I bought a comfortable reading chair for my living room, deep and soft and positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon light through my windows. I subscribed to art magazines and travel journals, feeding dreams I'd deferred for decades while other people's needs took priority. Most importantly, I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Patricia Williams had an office near the library, a warm, comfortable space filled with plants and soft lighting where I could finally unpack decades of accumulated resentment and disappointment. "Family loyalty is supposed to be reciprocal," she told me during one of our early sessions. "You've been operating under a definition of love that requires you to give everything and ask for nothing in return." "That's what mothers do," I said, echoing David's words. "Some mothers do that. But it's not healthy, and it's not sustainable. Real love includes respect, consideration, and mutual support. But what if setting boundaries means losing them completely? Dr. Williams leaned back in her chair, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. What if not setting boundaries means losing yourself completely? The question haunted me for weeks. How much of myself had I already sacrificed in the name of family harmony? How much of my own identity had been subsumed by my role as the endlessly available mother and grandmother? Christmas arrived gray and cold, the first holiday season in decades that I would spend entirely alone. No gift shopping for people who took my generosity for granted, no cooking elaborate meals for relatives who treated my efforts as their due. Instead, I volunteered at a soup kitchen in downtown Brooklyn, serving meals to homeless veterans and elderly people who'd been abandoned by their own families. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was spending Christmas with strangers who appreciated my efforts more than my own children did. "You're new," observed Carlos, a regular volunteer who'd been ladling gravy for 15 years. "What brought you here?" "Family problems," I said, and he nodded with the understanding of someone who'd heard that story many times before. "Family's complicated," he said. "Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who hurt us worst. Sometimes the people who say they love us don't actually know how to show it." I worked until my feet ached and my back protested, and it was the most satisfying Christmas I'd experienced in years. No one expected anything from me except the service I was freely offering. No one took my efforts for granted or treated my presence as an inconvenience to be managed. On the subway ride home, I made a decision. I was going to plan another trip. Not to prove anything to my family, but simply because I wanted to travel, to see new places and meet new people and continue the adventure I'd started in Santa Fe. This time, I chose Ireland. I'd never been to Europe, had never even owned a passport until I applied for one in January with the determination of someone who'd finally decided her dreams mattered. The trip was planned for May, a 2-week tour that would take me from Dublin to the countryside, from ancient castles to modern cities, from the literary landmarks I'd read about for decades to the scenic coastlines I'd only seen in photographs. I didn't tell anyone about the trip. Not the book club, not Dr. Williams, certainly not David or Jennifer. This adventure was completely mine, funded with money from my retirement account and motivated by nothing more than my own desire to see the world before I was too old to enjoy it. The planning process was elaborate and exciting. I researched historical sites and cultural experiences, bought appropriate clothing and walking shoes, even took a basic Irish history class at the community college to enhance my appreciation of what I'd be seeing. For the first time in years, I had something to anticipate that had nothing to do with other people's schedules or needs. I was planning an experience based entirely on my own interests and desires, and the freedom was intoxicating. Spring arrived early that year, trees blooming in March and daffodils pushing through the soil in Prospect Park with unseasonable enthusiasm. I was pruning the small garden behind my building when I heard a familiar voice calling my name. "Linda? Linda Cohen?" I turned to see Jennifer walking toward me, her expression carefully neutral but her posture tense. She was dressed for success in a tailored suit and expensive heels, but she looked tired around the eyes, older than I remembered. "Hello, Jennifer. I was in the neighborhood for a work appointment. Thought I might stop by." A lie, obviously. Jennifer never came to my neighborhood unless she needed something, and she certainly didn't make unscheduled social visits. But I was curious about what had brought her to my doorstep after months of silence. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where we'd had so many conversations over the years, though most of them had been requests for money or time rather than actual discussions. "You look good," she said, and she seemed surprised by the observation. I did look good. Better than I had in years. The pottery classes had strengthened my hands, the therapy had lightened my spirit, and the anticipation of my Irish adventure had given me something to smile about. "Thank you. David's worried about you." "We both are." "Are you?" "That's kind of you." Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She'd come here with an agenda, but my calm response wasn't fitting the script she'd prepared. "Rachel misses you terribly. She asks about you constantly." The mention of my granddaughter hit its intended target. My heart clenched with longing for the sweet girl who'd visited me in secret, who'd told me she was proud of me for standing up for myself. "I miss her too. Maybe we could work something out. Some kind of arrangement where you could see the kids more regularly." Here it was. The negotiation I'd been expecting since this whole standoff began. Jennifer was here to broker a deal, to find terms that would restore their access to my services without requiring them to treat me with actual respect. "What kind of arrangement?" I asked. "Well, we know you've been going through a difficult time, making some unusual decisions. But we want to be supportive. Maybe if you talked to someone professional, got some help working through these issues. Professional help for the disease of demanding respect. Therapy to cure me of the delusion that I deserve to be treated like family rather than hired help." "I am seeing someone professional," I said. She's helping me understand healthy boundaries in relationships. Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. That's good. But maybe someone who specializes in family dynamics. Someone who could help you see the situation from everyone's perspective. I see the situation just fine, Jennifer. Do you? Because from where we're sitting, it looks like you've thrown away 40 years of family relationships over a misunderstanding about a vacation. A misunderstanding. The deliberate exclusion from my son's birthday celebration, the years of financial exploitation, the casual dismissal of my worth as a human being, all a simple misunderstanding that I was too emotionally unstable to process correctly. What is it you want? I asked. Jennifer leaned forward, her expression earnest and manipulative in equal measure. We want our family back. We want the kids to have their grandmother in their lives. We want to find a way to move past all this drama. And what are you prepared to offer in return? Offer? What changes are you prepared to make in how you treat me? What respect are you prepared to show? What consideration will you give to my feelings and needs? The questions seemed to confuse her, as if the idea of mutual accommodation in a relationship was a foreign concept. We're prepared to be more inclusive in our planning, to make sure you're informed about family events. Informed, but not necessarily invited? Well, not everything is appropriate for. I mean, some activities might be challenging for someone your age. Someone my age. The woman who just planned a 2-week solo trip to Ireland, who was taking pottery classes and hiking in national parks and living more independently than most people half her age. Jennifer, I said quietly, I'm leaving for Ireland in 3 weeks. I'll be gone for 2 weeks, traveling alone, seeing places I've dreamed of visiting for 30 years. Her mouth fell open slightly. Ireland? By yourself? By myself. Because I'm not the fragile, confused old woman you've decided I am. I'm a capable adult who's finally learned to prioritize her own happiness. But that's so far. What if something happens? What if you need help? Then I'll handle it, the same way I've handled every crisis and challenge for the past 72 years. Jennifer stared at me like I'd announced plans to climb Mount Everest. In her mind, apparently, independence was a young person's game, and my desire for adventure was further evidence of mental decline. David won't approve of this. He'll be worried sick. David's approval is no longer required for my life choices. She left 20 minutes later, our conversation having gone nothing like she'd planned. Instead of negotiating a return to our old dynamic, she discovered that the old Linda, accommodating, self-sacrificing, endlessly available, no longer existed. That evening, David called. His voice was tight with barely controlled frustration. Jennifer told me about your conversation. This Ireland thing is ridiculous, Mom. You have no business traveling internationally alone at your age. I have every business doing whatever I choose to do with my own life and money. What if something happens to you? What if you have a medical emergency or get lost or? Then I'll deal with it. The same way millions of people deal with travel complications every day. This isn't like you, Mom. The mother I know wouldn't take unnecessary risks, wouldn't worry her family like this. The mother he knew. The woman who'd defined herself entirely through other people's needs, who'd never developed an identity separate from her roles as wife, mother, and grandmother. Maybe you never really knew me, I said. Maybe I never knew me either until recently. You're scaring us. This isn't normal behavior for someone your age. Normal behavior for someone my age is sitting quietly in my apartment, grateful for whatever attention you choose to give me, never demanding more than you're comfortable offering. Is that the kind of normal you want me to return to? Silence. Long, uncomfortable silence that stretched between us like years of accumulated resentment. We could compromise, he said finally. I'm listening. Cancel the Ireland trip. It's too risky, too far, too much. But maybe we could plan something together. A family vacation where everyone's included. A family vacation where I'd probably end up doing most of the planning and paying for more than my share, where I'd be grateful for inclusion while still being treated as the hired help. David, I appreciate the offer. But I'm going to Ireland. I've planned this trip for months, I've paid for it with my own money, and I'm looking forward to it more than I can express. And if we can't support this decision? There it was. The ultimatum I'd been expecting, delivered with the cold precision of someone who'd become skilled at emotional manipulation. Then you'll miss out on hearing about my adventure when I come back. I hung up before he could respond, my heart pounding but my resolve stronger than ever. 3 weeks later, I was boarding a plane at JFK, bound for Dublin with a suitcase full of carefully chosen clothes and a heart full of anticipation. The woman sitting next to me was traveling alone too, a retired professor from Boston who decided to fulfill a lifelong dream of tracing her Irish ancestry. My children think I'm crazy, she confided as we flew over the Atlantic. They can't understand why I'd want to travel alone at my age. Maybe they've never learned the difference between alone and lonely, I suggested. Ireland was everything I'd hoped and more. 2 weeks of spectacular scenery, fascinating history, warm people who treated solo travelers with kindness rather than pity. I stayed in bed and breakfasts where the owners made me feel like family, joined day tours where I met people from around the world, explored ancient castles and modern cities with the wonder of someone seeing the world with fresh eyes. On my last day in Dublin, I bought myself a traditional claddagh ring, the heart and crown and hands symbolizing love, loyalty, and friendship. But I wore it with the heart pointing toward me, the traditional sign of someone who was perfectly content being single. The flight home was bittersweet. I was returning to Brooklyn refreshed and renewed, but also returning to the ongoing conflict with my family, to the loneliness that had become the price of my newfound self-respect. But as the plane descended toward JFK, I realized something had fundamentally changed in my understanding of what home meant. Home wasn't just the place where I lived, but the life I'd built for myself, the relationships I'd cultivated based on mutual respect, the dreams I'd finally given myself permission to pursue. At baggage claim, I was surprised to see a familiar face in the crowd. Rachel, now 14 and taller than ever, was standing near the exit with a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, Grandma," in colorful markers. My heart swelled with joy and confusion in equal measure. She rushed toward me as I emerged from the secure area, her arms wrapping around me in the kind of enthusiastic hug that had become so rare in recent years. "Welcome home. I missed you so much." "Rachel, sweetheart. What are you doing here? How did you know when I'd arrive?" "I've been checking the airline website every day. I took the subway after school. I wanted to surprise you." Behind her, looking distinctly uncomfortable, stood David and Jennifer. They'd apparently been enlisted as reluctant chauffeurs for Rachel's surprise, their expressions reflecting the awkwardness of the situation. "Hi, Mom," David said quietly. "David. Jennifer." We stood there for a moment, for people connected by blood and history but divided by months of hurt and misunderstanding. Rachel, bless her heart, seemed determined to bridge the gap through sheer enthusiasm. "Tell me everything about Ireland. Did you see the cliffs of Moher? Did you kiss the Blarney Stone? Did you eat real Irish soda bread?" I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd shared with family in longer than I could remember. "I did see the cliffs, though they wouldn't let me kiss the stone because I'm too old and might fall off the castle. And yes, I ate more soda bread than was probably good for me." "Too old to kiss a stone but not too old to travel halfway around the world by yourself," Jennifer muttered, her tone somewhere between admiration and annoyance. "Apparently not," I agreed cheerfully. The drive back to Brooklyn was filled with Rachel's questions and my enthusiastic answers. I told them about the bed and breakfast where the owner's mother was 93 and still tended her own garden. About the tour guide who'd made ancient history come alive with stories passed down through generations. About the couple from Australia I'd befriended, who were planning their next adventure to Scotland. "It sounds amazing," Rachel said wistfully. "I want to travel like that someday." "You will," I told her. "Never let anyone convince you that you're too young or too old or too anything to chase your dreams." I caught David's eyes in the rearview mirror, and for just a moment, I saw something that might have been pride mixed with regret. They dropped me off at my apartment, Rachel insisting on carrying my suitcase upstairs despite my protests that she was still recovering from a growth spurt. At my front door, she hugged me again, whispering in my ear, "I'm proud of you, Grandma. For going on your adventure. For being brave." After they left, I unpacked slowly, hanging my travel clothes next to the wardrobe I'd expanded over the past year. The ceramic bowl from Santa Fe sat on my windowsill next to a small piece of Irish crystal I'd bought in Waterford, both catching the afternoon light like small mirrors reflecting my journey toward independence. That evening, David called. His voice was different, quieter, less certain than it had been in months. "Mom? Did you really have a good time?" "I had a wonderful time, David. One of the best experiences of my life." "You weren't scared? Traveling alone, I mean." "Sometimes. But I was more excited than scared. And I was never really alone. I met so many interesting people, made connections I never would have made if I'd been part of a group." Jennifer showed me some of the pictures Rachel found online. From the bed and breakfast website. "You looked happy." I had been happy. Radiantly, completely happy in a way I'd forgotten was possible. I was happy. "I've been thinking about what you said. About respect and boundaries and everything. And maybe I haven't been the son you deserved. Maybe we haven't been the family you deserved." The admission hung in the air between us, fragile and precious as a soap bubble. This was the closest David had come to acknowledging his role in our estrangement, the first crack in the wall of defensiveness he'd built around his family's treatment of me. "I love you, David. I've always loved you. But love without respect isn't enough anymore." "What would respect look like? Practically, I mean?" The question revealed how fundamentally he'd misunderstood our relationship. He genuinely didn't know what respectful treatment would involve because he'd never considered me worthy of it. "It would look like including me in family planning instead of assuming I'm available for whatever role you assign me." It would look like appreciating my contributions instead of taking them for granted. It would look like treating me like someone whose feelings and preferences matter. What about the money? The loans? What about them? Do you want us to pay you back? I considered the question carefully. The money was gone, probably forever, and demanding repayment would only create more conflict. But the casual assumption that my financial support was an entitlement rather than a gift, that needed to change. I don't need you to pay me back, I said. But I need you to stop assuming my money is available for your emergencies. If you need financial help in the future, we need to discuss it honestly, including whether I can afford it and whether it's fair to ask. That seems reasonable. David, I'm 73 years old. I don't know how many healthy years I have left, but however many there are, I want to spend them feeling valued and respected. I'm done being taken for granted. I understand. I think I understand. I hope you do. Because I meant what I said, I'll always love you, but I won't buy that love with my dignity. We talked for another hour, the longest conversation we'd had in years that wasn't about a crisis or emergency. David told me about his work, his struggles with the changing construction industry, his concerns about raising teenagers in an increasingly complicated world. I told him about my pottery classes and book club, about the friendships I'd developed and the confidence I'd gained, about the woman I was becoming in the absence of constant family demands. You do sound different, he said as our conversation wound down. Stronger, maybe? I feel stronger. And happier. And more myself than I have in decades. I'm sorry it took so long for me to listen. I'm sorry it took so long for me to demand that you listen. After we hung up, I sat in my new reading chair with a cup of tea and one of the Irish novels I'd bought in Dublin. Outside my window, Brooklyn hummed with its familiar energy, the sounds of home that had comforted me through decades of joy and sorrow. But home felt different now. Not like a place where I waited passively for other people to decide my worth, but like a sanctuary I'd created for myself, a launching pad for adventures yet to come. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Thank you for showing me that grandmothers can be brave too. I smiled, already planning my next adventure. Maybe Scotland, to trace the Irish couple's footsteps. Maybe Italy, to see the art I'd studied in books for so many years. Maybe somewhere entirely unexpected, chosen for no reason other than that it called to my newly awakened spirit. The woman who'd discovered her family's travel documents 8 months ago, who'd felt invisible and abandoned and worthless, was gone. In her place was someone I was still getting to know, someone who'd learned that love without respect was just another form of servitude, someone who'd discovered that the most important relationship she could cultivate was the one with herself. I raised my teacup in a toast to the empty apartment, to the adventures behind me and ahead of me, to the hard-won wisdom that had cost me everything I thought I wanted and given me everything I never knew I needed. Outside, the Brooklyn evening settled into darkness, and inside, Linda Cohen, traveler, artist, woman of independent means and spirit, planned her next chapter with the joy of someone who'd finally learned to write her own story. The phone rang one more time that evening. Jennifer's number on the display. Linda? It's Jennifer. I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. I wanted to apologize. For how we've treated you. For the things I said. For everything, really. The apology caught me off guard. Jennifer had never been one for admitting mistakes or acknowledging hurt feelings. Thank you for saying that. Rachel made me understand some things. About how we'd been acting, about what we'd been taking for granted. She's a smart kid. She is. You're raising her well. We're trying. And part of that is showing her what respectful family relationships look like. Which means we need to do better with you. I appreciate that, Jennifer. Would you? Would you be willing to try again? With us, I mean. As a family. I considered the question carefully. The hurt was still there, the memories of exclusion and dismissal still fresh. But underneath the pain was something else, hope. Hope that relationships could change, that people could grow, that families could learn to love each other better. I'm willing to try, I said. But it has to be different this time. It has to be based on mutual respect. I understand. We'll do better. I promise we'll do better. 3 months later, we celebrated Rachel's 15th birthday with a small family dinner at a restaurant she chose. Not an expensive place, not somewhere designed to impress, just a quiet Italian restaurant in Park Slope where we could talk and laugh and remember why we'd loved each other in the first place. I brought her a gift I'd never have thought to give before my transformation, a small suitcase and a travel journal, along with a promise to take her on a grandmother-granddaughter trip anywhere she wanted to go when she turned 16. Really? She asked, her eyes bright with possibility. Anywhere? Anywhere your passport can take us. David looked uncertain, protective instincts warring with his new understanding of what respectful relationships required. That's a big trip for someone her age, he said carefully. It's a big trip for someone any age, I agreed. That's what makes it an adventure. Rachel was already planning, pulling out her phone to research destinations and possibilities. Could we go to Japan? Or maybe Iceland? Oh, what about Morocco? All excellent choices, I said, laughing at her enthusiasm. We have time to research and plan and dream. Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed my hand, a gesture that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. Thank you, she said quietly. For not giving up on us completely. Thank you for learning to see me differently. The evening wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, still conversations that skirted around sensitive topics, still the careful navigation of people learning to relate to each other in new ways. But it was real. It was honest. It was based on choice rather than obligation, on respect rather than assumption. As I rode the subway home that night, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought me to this point. The journey from invisible family appendage to independent woman, from someone who bought love with sacrifice to someone who commanded respect with dignity. The travel documents I'd found spread across David's kitchen counter had revealed more than just a vacation I wasn't invited to join. They'd revealed a family dynamic that had slowly drained me of my sense of self-worth, a pattern of taking and giving that had left me emotionally bankrupt. But they'd also revealed something else, my own capacity for change, for growth, for choosing a different path even at 73 years old. The woman who'd cried over the shattered pottery mug on her kitchen floor was gone. In her place was someone still learning, still growing, still discovering what it meant to live authentically after decades of living for others. I pulled out my phone and began typing a text to Rachel. Start making a list of places you want to see. Grandma's travel fund is ready for another adventure. Her response came back immediately, best grandma ever. I smiled, looking out the subway window at the lights of Brooklyn rushing past in the darkness. Best grandma ever, not because I'd sacrificed everything for my family's comfort, but because I'd finally learned to value myself enough to demand the same from them. The train pulled into my stop and I gathered my purse and the small bag of leftovers Rachel had insisted I take home. Above ground, the familiar streets of my neighborhood welcomed me back to the sanctuary I'd created, the life I'd built on my own terms. Tomorrow I would water the plants I'd started growing on my fire escape, plants chosen for their beauty rather than their utility. I would work on the pottery piece I'd been shaping for weeks, my hands finding increasing confidence in the clay. I would call Ruth about our book club's next selection and maybe start researching those destinations Rachel was dreaming about. I would live the life I'd given myself permission to claim, the life that had been waiting all these years for me to decide I was worth it. Standing on my front steps, keys in hand, I looked up at the stars you can barely see in the city and made a promise to myself. Never again would I make myself small for someone else's comfort. Never again would I apologize for taking up space in my own life. The door opened to my quiet apartment, to the reading chair and the art on the walls and the evidence of a woman who'd finally learned to prioritize her own happiness. To the life I'd built from the ashes of my family's abandonment, better and stronger and more authentic than anything I'd lost. I was Linda Cohen, world traveler, artist, woman of independent spirit and hard-won wisdom. And for the first time in 73 years, that was exactly who I wanted to be. Have you ever lived something like this, or known someone who found themselves invisible in their own family? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Together, we can help each other find the courage to write our own chapters of dignity and self-respect.